Welcome back to the original Bama Football Tailgate Show. And before we talk football with our good friend Chris Lowe and start the second hour of the show, let me remind you that we're brought to you by Yuengling Lager, America's oldest brewery. Our friend Cheryl Yuengling, part of this proud American company. 6 generations of Yuenglings have been making great beer in our country. Cheryl from Pottsville, Pennsylvania, didn't go to Penn State. Nope, she's an Alabama grad, and she puts a little bit of crimson love in each one of those green bottles. And don't forget right now as well, you're looking for something light, refreshing, low on carbs and calories. That's Yuengling Flight. Always awesome talking with the senior writer for ESPN College Football, and I'm talking about Chris Lowe. This is our Drive to a Championship tailgate brought to you by Genesis of Tuscaloosa. Chris, great to see you. How you been?
Great, Mick. It's always good to be with you, man. It's it's the second week. I guess if you don't count week 0, which I always get a big kick out of, but second week, and you start to get a little bit better feel. I don't know about you, but I love listening to talk radio and seeing stuff on the internet, talking to colleagues of mine and hearing all the crazy overreactions from week 1. And then if you go back, of course, I've been in it forever, but if you go back, and I think back going, 15, 10, 25 years ago and thinking about what you thought in week 1 versus what's going on in week 10, it's always a lot of funny to sort of look back and see just how wrong we are a lot of times.
Yeah, no doubt. And today you got one of the biggest games in college football, Texas and Alabama. And this is a top, 11 matchup, number 4 Alabama, number 11 Texas. But 2 teams that people feel like could make a run to the college football playoff. Your thoughts on both of these teams, and you talked to Coach Saban and you talked to Coach Sark, their feelings on the teams that they have.
Well, I think this should be Texas's most talented team since Sark has been there. I think their deepest team. The team that's probably most equipped to make a real run at the playoff. And I know every year we hear that Texas is back and that they're supposed to be back. But the reality was he needed to get his guys in there, and they needed to sort of be able to settle in. And this is Sark's 3rd year there. So I do think this is a chance for them to make some real noise. Ewers is a guy who's played now for a while. I like what they have done in the lines of scrimmage, especially up front offensively, and their ability to protect him and give him a chance to do what he does. Alabama this is a different Alabama team than we've seen over the last few years. You had a quarterback-driven Alabama team over the last, really going back to what Jalen Hurts and Tua, 16 and 17, a quarterback receiver-driven team, Mick. And that's not what this team is. Now, I think Milroe, and I've told you from the get-go, that I thought he would be the guy this year, and he is the guy. Now he's going to have to continue to play well, but his ability to run the football and be dynamic and sort of supplement what they do in the running game is a big thing. Will be a big part of who they are, and he can throw the football. Everybody talks about his arm. Listen, he's got NFL type arm strength. That's never been a question. It's the intermediate throws, the tighter window throws on 3rd down, the layup type throws. Out of the back, finesse throws. That's where he's sort of got to prove that he can do it on a consistent basis. But this is going to be a run the football, lean on that offensive line, use Jalen Milroe to his strengths, and then on defense to sort of complement that offense, create more turnovers, create more negative plays like Alabama in their best days under Nick Saban did on defense. They didn't do that last year. I think if you look up the stats, they were way down in the hundreds when it comes to creating turnovers. So that's where they have to be better. And I know for a fact, having been there some this summer, that was a priority with Nick Saban and Kevin Steele. So it's a little bit different Alabama football team. I do think both of these teams come late October, early November will at least be in a conversation for the playoff. But I think when you look at Texas, they got to prove it. They got to prove it they can win these big stage games, especially on the road. And then Alabama in this sort of new version, new old, because this was sort of Nick Saban at his roots when he came to Alabama. We're going to bloody people's noses. We're going to throw the ball over your head, and we're going to smother you and take the ball away from you on defense. So this is sort of getting back to that style of Alabama football. And now in their first real game, after just outclassing Middle Tennessee State last week, we get a chance to see how that works.
Coach Saban has been awfully relaxed in the press conferences. You talk to him, on a one-to-one basis. But to me, I feel like that's because he's pretty confident in his defense. He's a defensive guy, and it seems like when he's relaxed and confident, he's got a good defense. Is that the vibe you're getting from him?
Well, yeah, I think he does. I think he likes the fact that they're better too, or should be better up front offensively. It's still Nick's been around long enough. It's still a line of scrimmage league. He knows that as well as anybody. And when you're not down, when you don't have Jalen Waddle and Jerry Jeudy and Devontae Smith running around at receiver, you better be good up front. That's the great equalizer. And when you don't have a first round, at least right now, I don't know that Jalen's going to be a first round quarterback. That again, you've got to be able to sort of impose your will in the line of scrimmage on defense and offense. I mean, think about it. You go back to 16, Mick, and nobody maybe knew this at the time, but from 16 to last year, essentially everybody that took a meaningful snap at quarterback for Alabama ended up being a first-round draft pick.
Right.
Bryce was the number 1 pick last year. So you got to improvise, and I don't think anybody's been as good as Nick at adapting and evolving, and I think that's where they are. I do think he likes the defense. He's very comfortable with Kevin Steele. This is Kevin's 3rd time working with Nick. He understands unequivocally what Nick wants on defense. And I think more than anything, Kevin understands how Nick wants it taught, which goes back more to this offseason, spring ball, and preseason. They're not as deep as Nick Saban would like to be on defense, especially at linebacker. They really need to stay healthy at linebacker, or they're going to have a lot of younger guys step up in roles that maybe they're not used to playing. They like the way the secondary is gelled, and they got a couple of guys that are hurt and could be iffy for this week. The UAB transfer, who they really liked, and then Malachi Moore, who was sort of that guy that was a little bit of a wild card back there, could play a couple of different spots. And that's, you never want to be down a DB or two against a kid like Ewers, who can throw the football, and they've got some explosive receivers. And I think up front in the middle of that defensive line, they feel like they're closer than they have been to what they were in their past. And then I think the key, too, is Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner is an NFL player. He's probably going to be a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. He didn't play great last year. He was okay. He didn't play great. He was great as a freshman. This year, if he sort of morphs into what they think he's going to be and the way he's played to this point, that he's that finisher off the edge, much like Will Anderson was.
Yeah, really interesting. So far, the SEC hasn't looked good in some of these early season matchups. South Carolina beaten by North Carolina, which, look, they were an underdog, not much, but a team last year that had a lot of momentum beat Tennessee at the end of the season, beat Clemson. Then you saw LSU get dismantled by Florida State. What does that tell us about the SEC as we move into week 2? Anything?
Well, I'm just like I said at the outset of our conversation, I'm not going to jump too far out there after just 1 week. LSU didn't look great in the first month last year, and they ended up playing the SEC championship game. And Tennessee walks in and just boat races them in Baton Rouge in September. We'll find out. I don't know if there's a great team in the SEC this year. A lot of quarterback changes, a lot of new faces at quarterback. Mick, I think there's going to be some more carnage in the league. I think you're going to see some teams beating some teams that maybe we haven't seen in the last few years. To some degree, we've seen it, but I can see a Kentucky or a Mississippi State, an Ole Miss, an Arkansas, even a South Carolina, like they beat Tennessee last year late. I could see more of that, maybe even more of that this year than we've seen in the last couple of years. Now, from 1,000 feet away, that's not great for the SEC because that may, if that does happen, may potentially hurt their playoff chances. But I can see a year this year. I guess last year was the same way. Everybody but Georgia had at least 2 losses. Do we see a year this year where everybody has at least 2 losses, which would really make things pretty fascinating for the SEC going into the playoff? Georgia's schedule is such, though, man, I have a hard time seeing the Dogs in the regular season losing 2 games. Now, could they lose, say, to Tennessee? They're in Knoxville the next to last week and then lose again in the championship game? Yeah. But, boy, I'd be really shocked if they lose 2 during the regular season. But, no, I think there's a lot of teams that are pretty comparable. when you get down into past 2 or 3, maybe down to 10 or 9, that on any day or any Saturday could give a lot of people trouble. It could be a tough out. I think the most underrated team, let me give you 2. Most underrated team, I think, is Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State will be a lot better. They're seemingly picked last every year in the West. They were again this year. I bet they're not the last team in the West this year when it's all said and done. Texas A&M is, to me, the most improved team, will be the most improved team. Maybe not in the SEC, but in college football. Now, maybe we should sort of revisit this conversation next week because they play at Miami on Saturday. I think that's a big tone setter for Jimbo Fisher and that crowd. But I went and watched them practice this offseason. There's no reason with the talent they have and bring in a guy like Bobby Petrino, who's as good a play caller as there is in college football, that team shouldn't be at least a 9-win football team this year.
Very interesting. Chris, how can people follow you, read your work? How can they get a hold of Chris Lowe?
Well, at CeeLo ESPN is my Twitter, and certainly on our site, our college football site. We've got something up now on Jimbo Fisher and this year and how critical it is. So those are probably the 2 easiest ways. And I'll several times throughout the season there on the airwaves, your show in the state of Alabama, always look forward to speaking with the Alabama folks. I'm not sure there's a more passionate fan base in college football. You should do a poll on that. Who are the top 5 most passionate fan bases in college football? And the key to that, having done this, and you have too, is the coaches that can find a way. Of course, most of them don't hang around long enough in the SEC to do this, but when you can sort of stay on the right side of that passion, then it's, you got it going for you. But it's hard to do that. And you look at just since Mick has come to Alabama in 2007, I don't think we can count high enough to count the coaches who've come and gone in the SEC.
Wow, I know. That's no doubt about it.
It really is not for long, but it's I never cease to be amazed by the passion of the fan base, and everybody's spending so much money. Everybody's paying their coach so much money. I think every coach but one now, every coach but 2 in the SEC is making $6 million or more a year.
Big time. We should have coached instead of talked about football, right?
The best job going, though, is being paid not to coach. Well, there's a lot of those guys out there too. But I think when you pay that kind of money, and I'm sort of rambling, but when you pay that kind of money and you pay the kind of money they are now to build facilities and now you got the NIL world, every fan base feels like it's their God-given right that they're going to win or play for championships. And you do the math, and that's just not the way it is.
That's tough. Hey, guys, come to Tuscaloosa. The farmers market takes place every Saturday, the river market from 7 to noon. You got the Tuscaloosa Civil Rights Trail, the Tuscaloosa Amphitheater, Druid City Music Hall, and a lot of other really cool things. Visit Tuscaloosa.com. Always great hanging out with you, Chris. We'll do it again real soon. That's Chris Lowe from ESPN. More of the original Bama Tailgate Show right after this.